What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
We do turn now to that huge car shortage fueled by a chip shortage. General Motors temporarily shutting down more than half of its plants in North America.
General Motors plans to close its plant in Lordstown, Ohio. Thousands of workers there make the Chevy Cruze.
And it's just one of several plants that GM plans to close in the coming months.
In just a few months, a single policy decision from Washington has turned General Motors into a stark example of how expensive it can be to shield American jobs. A year that once promised steady growth has crumbled under the weight of tariffs. GM itself has acknowledged that duties will erase between $4 and $5 billion of earnings in 2025, nearly one-third of its expected profit. The numbers paint a harsh picture. In the second quarter alone, net income plunged 35%, with tariffs alone devouring more than $1.1 billion. Investors wasted no time reacting. GM stock dropped almost 7% the day of the announcement, closing at $49.59 and setting off alarms on Wall Street. This is no longer just a quarterly setback. Analysts warn of a darker horizon for the entire North American auto industry. If the country's largest automaker can be shaken this hard, what chance do smaller players have in the battles ahead? The financial damage quickly spilled onto the factory floor. Assembly lines that once roared with steel and sweat now echo with silence. In Detroit, GM's Factory Zero, once a symbol of America's electric future, was forced to halt production on April 11th, instantly leaving 200 workers jobless. In Ontario, the Ingersoll plant sent another 200 employees home on extended leave, with a return date delayed until at least October. In Oshawa, the night shift was cut entirely, displacing 700 workers indefinitely. Each closure is more than a statistic. It's families staring at uncertain paychecks and towns watching their lifeline snap. Experts now warn the North American auto sector could lose as many as 50,000 jobs if the trend continues. That is not simply a projection. It's the equivalent of entire communities being hollowed out. But the impact didn't end on the factory floor. The very people these tariffs were supposed to protect, American car buyers, were hit next. The promise of affordable American cars has turned into a reality of swelling invoices. Each pickup truck now costs roughly $3,200 more to build, a cost GM has no choice but to pass on to customers. Electric vehicles are even harder hit. Washington's tariff regime arrived alongside the elimination of the $7,500 federal tax credit that once made EVs attainable for middle-class families. For many households, the choice is no longer about horsepower or design. It's about survival. Pay thousands more upfront, or abandon the dream of owning an American-made car altogether. Higher prices also threaten GM's most ambitious project, its electric vehicle push-built on the Ultium platform. On paper, EV sales doubled in the second quarter compared to last year. In reality, the company must sell at least 100,000 Ultium vehicles annually just to break even, yet projections for 2025 suggest only about 65,000 will be sold. That leaves a multi-billion-dollar investment bleeding cash with no term path to profitability. The problems are compounded by politics. Federal funding for charging infrastructure has been frozen, stalling the very ecosystem needed to sustain widespread EV adoption. Without subsidies and without a reliable charging network, even loyal customers are questioning whether the shift to electric is worth the risk. The result is deeply ironic. GM's electrification strategy, once a bold statement of independence from fossil fuels and foreign rivals, has been caught in the crossfire of trade wars and political gridlock. A plan designed to carry Detroit into the next century has instead become collateral damage in today's economic battles. What began as a policy meant to defend American jobs has rippled through balance sheets, assembly lines, and household budgets. For GM, the pain is immediate and measurable. Billions wiped from profits, plants shuttered, workers dismissed, prices rising, and the electric future delayed. For the broader auto industry, the warning is clear. If a giant like General Motors can be rattled this hard, no one else is safe from what's coming next. The damage did not end with GM's balance sheet or its electric vehicle ambitions. Once the automaker stumbled, the entire industrial network surrounding it began to strain. In Tennessee, Audient closed 2 plants, wiping out 400 jobs overnight. Across Michigan and Indiana, smaller suppliers trimmed another 900 positions. Losses too small for national headlines, but devastating for families who depended on them. Even a diner across from a Michigan plant reported losing half its regular customers within weeks, a reminder that the pain spreads far beyond factory gates. The ripple effect reached global players as well. Volvo, facing soaring input costs, warned it would have to furlough 1,000 workers after the cost of building a single truck surged from $165,000 to $180,000. That kind of leap is not an inconvenience. It is an existential threat. A clear pattern emerged. Every tariff-driven shock at GM cascaded outward, stripping jobs from suppliers, draining foot traffic from small businesses, and unsettling multinationals that once viewed North America as a safe haven. This was no longer GM's crisis alone. It was becoming a regional breakdown with no clear escape route. The shockwaves quickly jumped from factory floors into the political arena, where tariffs evolved from a strategic tool into a weapon dividing allies, unions, and governments. What was meant to unify the country under an America First banner instead exposed deep fractures and reignited old debates over who really benefits from protectionism. President Trump doubled down, imposing a 25% tariff and dismissing GM's protest with a sharp rebuke. GM brought this on themselves. To supporters, his words showed courage, a willingness to challenge even the nation's largest automaker. To critics, they signaled a reckless gamble, one that ignored decades of industrial interdependence and treated thousands of livelihoods as expendable. Even union leaders split over the issue. Shawn Fain, president of the United Auto Workers, hailed the tariffs as a long overdue measure to protect American labor from foreign competition, calling them a shield against outsourcing. But across the border, Lana Payne, head of Canada's Unifor, condemned GM for sacrificing Canadian workers to score political points in Washington. For her, tariffs were not a shield but a sword, cutting into communities already stretched thin. Lawmakers in Washington also clashed over whether tariffs represented patriotic resolve or economic self-sabotage. Governors of auto-dependent states warned of collapsing tax bases, while trade hawks in Congress applauded the return of hardline policies. Each press conference, each televised soundbite, deepened the sense of disarray. Meanwhile, the workers caught in the middle heard every speech but saw no relief. In Detroit, Oshawa, and Ingersoll, factories stayed dark. Paychecks remained uncertain. Neighborhoods began to quietly unravel as families wondered how long they could hold on. For them, the debate was not about ideology or political theater. It was about survival, and whether their children would still have a future in towns built on the promise of the auto industry. The political divide over tariffs is mirrored on the ground, where entire regions built on the auto industry are fighting for survival. Detroit, once the beating heart of American manufacturing, is watching wave after wave of workers leave. Each departure weakens not only the factories but the city itself, draining tax revenues, hollowing out schools, and shuttering local businesses. Streets that once thrived on factory shifts now carry the quiet weight of uncertainty, lined with for sale signs and abandoned storefronts. Across the border, Ontario, long branded as the assembly line of North America, is confronting the same paralysis. Plants that once ran non-stop now sit idle, parking lots half empty and supply chains in limbo. In towns like Windsor and Oshawa, where generations grew up with steady paycheck from assembly plants, families now face a future where their children may never set foot on a factory floor. What was once a competitive advantage, cross-border integration, has become a choke point. Policies designed to protect American jobs are strangling the very ecosystem that sustained them. Cafes that serve shift workers now operate at half capacity. Trucking companies face delayed contracts. Service providers across the region watch their customer base evaporate. Local governments, starved of revenue, cut community programs, threatening libraries, sports leagues, and public transit. A resilient network now resembles a fragile glass pane splintering with each additional shock. For decades, the U.S.-Canada auto corridors symbolized efficiency and trust, a partnership that gave North America an edge over Europe and Asia. It wasn't just about building cars. It was about identity, about the belief that Detroit and Toronto together could create something greater than the sum of their parts. Today, that bond is fraying under the pressure of an America First doctrine that forgets the continent itself functions as an interconnected machine. When one gear seizes, the entire engine grinds to a halt. This crisis extends far beyond GM or even Detroit. It forces an uncomfortable question about the foundation of American industry in a globalized world. When tariffs become barriers, capital and production inevitably seek safer harbors. Investors are already whispering about moving assembly lines and research centers out of North America to regions where policy is steadier and costs are predictable. The global auto market is shifting, and Europe and Asia, with their stronger integration and lower volatility, are positioned to absorb what America loses. For decades, Detroit's message to the world was simple: American cars for global roads. But that promise is fading, replaced by a stark reversal: the world's cars filling the void left by America. If current policies persist, GM's projected $5 billion loss will look less like an isolated setback and more like the first chapter in a broader industrial collapse. The real danger is not just a wounded balance sheet, but the erosion of a manufacturing strength that once defined the United States. This moment raises a fundamental question: is this the price America is willing to pay for short-term political victories? Or are we witnessing the slow unraveling of a century-old legacy, one that, once broken, may never be rebuilt?